start the recording? It is recording. There we go. There we go. People are starting to join in. There we go. Hopefully everyone can hear us. Say out if you can. All right, to the people that have joined, welcome to Des Talks episode 2 with Engineered to Slide. So we're lucky to have everyone here tonight, and thanks to everyone for giving up their time to join in and watch, and the other boys for coming along and talking to us. So I'll just start off with a welcome to country and some housekeeping. Matt, can you share your thing?
Yep. Is it up?
Yep. Just start the slideshow. Beauty. So, as we gather for this meeting, physically dispersed and virtually construct, let us take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognise the various traditional lands on which we do our business today. We acknowledge their elders past and present and emerging of all the land we work and live on, and their ancestral spirits with gratitude and respect. So, overview for this episode, a little bit of housekeeping. I'll introduce the other guys and myself. We'll have our presentation / discussion, and towards the end we'll do a bit of an open Q&A. If you have any questions during the webinar, feel free to use the chat function or the Q&A function to ask those, and we'll keep an eye on them and ask them as we go along. Hit the next one, Matt. Yep. Sweet. All right. So I'll introduce myself briefly. My name's Trent, if you can probably see. I'm the president of the Deakin Engineering Society, and I'm a third year civil, so probably don't have much to do with Engineered to Slide, but the other boys will tell you more. Matt, go ahead.
I'm Matt. I'm third year mechanical engineering student too, and I am the vice president of events at Deakin Engineering Society, and I work with Nigel at Engineered to Slide, sort of on a casual basis, as well as studying. And Nigel, if you want to introduce yourself and what you do.
Yeah, well, I'm Nigel Petrie, and I run Engineered to Slide, and basically I'm based here within Deakin University up in the Manufutures building. So I've been based here this is my second year now, and it's been good to be a part of the university and also have something to do with the students that are a part of it. So people like yourself, Matt, can come up the hill, and it's been really valuable to my business, and I think it's been good for you guys to kind of get a bit of insight into real industry and how it all works.
Absolutely. So we'll start off by getting to know you a bit, Nigel, and just going to get you to explain your history from childhood, sort of how you got to where you are now, without going down the rabbit hole too far. But sort of where you did your apprenticeship and what sort of work you've done before coming to engineer and starting Engineered to Slide.
Yeah, well, basically, I always had a real interest in motorsport from growing up. My parents and my whole family were always really interested in motorsport and loved going to the speedway. I grew up in a pretty small country town. It had a tech school there, so in high school, I was a part of, I guess, the automotive wing, woodwork, and also metalwork. And in year 10, 11 and 12, I really found my love for fabrication, and I guess was sort of weighing up a career in either sort of being a mechanic or, wondering sort of what route I should take. And then as soon as I sort of got into metalwork class and started using lathes and welders and all of that type of thing, it really just clicked with me, because I was always watching motorsport and was never really actively a part of it, because I didn't really understand like how people could, do it with limited budgets. And then when I understood how to build stuff, I was like, well, maybe this is my chance. I could do stuff and sort of build up my own machines and be able to compete in this stuff. So that all stemmed from, I guess, the early days in racing BMX, and that sort of then led to motocross, and then motocross then sort of led to cars. And when I was 15, just toiled away at the supermarket, and then finally bought my first car. And from that point on, it's just been pretty much cars and motorcycles non-stop. So when I got out of high school, or halfway through high school, I got one of the local papers from Geelong, or my mum and dad did, and they saw that Ford was hiring. So yeah, halfway through my year 12, I came down to Geelong and had an interview to become a fitter and turner, and then had that interview and ended up getting the job before I finished year 12, but sat out year 12 and got that all done. My go-to, if I wasn't going to Ford to work, was going to be coming here to Deakin and doing engineering here. I had an enter score that I think would have got me in, but I chose the work route just because I wanted cash and I wanted to go build stuff. And yeah, Ford was really good. I got an apprenticeship, and that took 4 years to complete. Ended up getting a advanced diploma in engineering. So I came out of that trade as a fitter and turner, machinist, and with an advanced diploma. So that took a lot of night school and work on the side. So it was a pretty busy 4 years. And then once the 4 years was up, I applied for a job at Ford Product Development, which was a really, in a big company like Ford, it was great. I sort of got the chance to move around and go to different areas, and I felt really at home at product development, because you're doing something different all the time, and you're talking to engineers, and they're sort of offering their opinions on things, and just getting to learn more than being in a manufacturing place. And
so
that
product development was kind of like the engineers came to you with a new part they wanted to try, and said, can we try and machine this up and see how it goes, and if it breaks, you'll do it in another way, and that kind of thing?
Sure, yeah, which was exactly what I wanted to do, because having the opportunity to sort of learn from what the engineers were telling me to do, it gave me an insight into, I guess, that other world that I probably could have chose if I went to university. But
Cool.
Yeah, it was sort of like a long way around. And it's funny now being here at Deakin after working at Ford for 18 years, and yeah, engineer to slide has basically been, I guess, my after hours, and the name really just came about to give something a name. And yeah, I just sort of pursued that, and yeah, it's ended up here, which is really cool.
Yeah, perfect.
Beauty.
I have a quick question before we keep moving on. When you transitioned from Ford to engineer to slide, where you just said it was an after work kind of thing, for a while, I know you anyway, so I know that you were competing in drifting and stuff. How long did you do the drift competitions, and is that sort of how engineered to slide came to be, through that sort of stuff?
Yeah, definitely. That's how it was all born. And I think in 2004, drifting came to Australia, and the first event that I competed in, and the first event that was nationally run in Australia, I did really well at, and won some prize money and some parts, and I bought a car, and then started modifying that. And I really loved drifting for the fact that it wasn't circuit racing. So you didn't have all of these people like knowing how to do everything, sort of telling you how to do everything, and there wasn't like a rule book on anything. And you could use, I guess, your fabrication ability, your understanding for the car, and also the way that you want to build it to sort of enhance the way that you drive it. I just love that whole aspect. And then there was a really strong following, I guess, from the years 2004 till probably 2010, where I sort of competed as nationally as I could afford. It was just a one-man show, basically. My parents helped out as much as they could. And yeah, I would throw the car on the trailer and travel to as many events as I could. And yeah, just pretty much put it all out there on the blog, and And then that sort of in turn led me to doing a lot of fabrication jobs on my own car. And then people would say, hey, I want to do that to my car. And then that would sort of get me thinking about what I was doing, whether it could turn into a product and how it could be something that was a little bit more long lasting. That went from doing gearbox conversions, so making an adapter plate to suit a stronger gearbox, to then building roll cages, to building steering knuckles that I'd modify for more steering angle. And I guess just as I went along, I'd learned to do more and more things, and my car had developed, my driving would get better. Unbeknownst to me, I was sort of building a business on the side without really even knowing it. And yeah, to get to the point where I was just doing it after hours to then do it, you know, full time was something that was creeping up. And it got to the point where I was working at Ford during the day, and I'd use that time to sort of rest and recuperate. And then I'd get home and I'd have so much stuff to do. And it got to the point where I was just, you know, running out of hours and sort of biting off way more than I could chew. And yeah, manufacturing in Australia has slowed down a lot, unfortunately. And it sort of presented itself a lot sooner than I probably thought it would have, but I'm pretty thankful for that.
Yep. So probably while you're talking about how engineered slide came to be and how you sort of had the thoughts about how you could make products to sell or people were wanting to buy the things you were making, we might start with sort of your latest thing that you've been doing lately is ETS Fab. Do you want to quickly explain what that is and how it works?
I guess, so ETS Fab came about from my friends in New Zealand, Ben and Andre, who developed a thing called HP Academy. So this HP Academy really came about from people wanting to get into motorsport and understand how things are done in motorsport. It's been quite a closed book up until this point, where it's really hard to find good information that has really solid, just a proper way of, I guess, putting it across to the viewer. So when they approached me to start ETS Fab, I jumped on board straight away. We went into a partnership, and I started writing my courses. So ETS Fab's about teaching people the way in which fabrication enhances motorsport.
Yep.
So this is through all different things. We've started off with motorsport fabrication fundamentals, which basically runs you through the basis of what you need to know to get in, from understanding nothing to being quite knowledgeable in understanding motorsport fabrication. And then we've just launched the ETS Fab TIG welding or practical TIG welding course, which really details all that there is to know about TIG welding, which is something that I think a lot of people are pretty keen to understand. And then we're moving on next to MIG welding. And then we'll run through a whole bunch of project-based, I guess, courses that'll entail or that'll incorporate roll cages, cooling systems, you know, everything there is involved in motorsport fabrication. So it's been a really good thing, and it's something that I wanted. Like, I was producing parts, and it was sort of, I found that by putting all of the information on the internet, people were gaining a lot more understanding of what I was doing. And then I found that instead of producing parts, if I produce courses so that people can understand how to do it themselves, then that would sort of offer a lot more knowledge and ways for people to do it themselves, because that's sort of who I attract. People don't, I guess the majority of people don't come to me wanting a product. They want to know how to do that product themselves. So
Yes.
that was sort of the basis around that. And it's been great. And it's something that has always been a part of what I do. If I go to an event, people will say, hey, I loved how you built that. Thanks for doing it. Like, I got into engineering, or I got into welding, or I learned to use the tools because you inspired me to do so. So I think that's really cool. And if yeah, if I leave anything as a legacy from Engineer to Slide, then I think if it's getting a few people off the couch and out into the garage and throwing spanners, then I think that's a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I really like the idea of passing on the knowledge and yeah, inspiring other people to do what you're doing.
Sure.
So we'll probably start with some of your current projects now.
Yep.
We'll talk about the Eastern Electric Bike project first. What are some details of that? What's the end goal and how far in progression is it? Yeah, and what is it basically?
Yeah, so Eastern Motors was something that was developed when I came here to Deakin. Being in an advanced engineering hub, I wanted to make the most of that opportunity and really encapsulate sort of all of the advanced manufacturing ideas and the way people go about things, because I'm leased on here for 3 years and I wanted to make the most out of that and learn from, or just learn things that I probably wouldn't have the opportunity to learn in other areas. Say if I was just to lease a shop somewhere, then I wouldn't have all of these people around me that I can get ideas from and learn from. So Eastern Motors came from my love of motorcycling. It came from my newfound love of electric motorcycles. So I've always been really keen push biker. As I said before, BMX started, and then recently I've been doing a lot of mountain biking and sort of downhill riding. And I really love that aspect, but then I also love motorcycles. But what I hate about motorcycles is the amount of maintenance and time and effort you need to, you'll spend the morning getting the bike ready, you'll spend 3 hours riding it, and then the whole afternoon sort of fixing it. And especially I love old motorbikes. So like in my garage, I have so many old bikes and they take so much of my time. I'll go in, I'll start one up, it'll foul a plug, I'll replace the plug, I'll check the oil, it'll do something to the battery or something. And I just wanted a motorcycle that I could ride, kind of like a push bike where you just jump on and you go. Electric motorcycles really kind of bridge that gap between having something that was completely as fast and gave you the exhilaration of a motorcycle, but didn't have all of the headaches behind the noise, the maintenance, and I guess also I think it's sort of the long-term cost of a bike. Like if you blow up a motor on a dirt bike, it's going to cost you pretty much what it's worth to rebuild it. So yeah, electric motorcycles came from that, and I just wanted something to ride. And when I bought an Alta and imported it into Australia and rode it, it's basically an off-road electric dirt bike that has around 35 kilowatts or 50 horsepower and needs nothing but an hour-long charge. And then it just rips through the bush and it's silent, and it's just an absolutely amazing feeling.
Yeah.
And yeah, motorcycles are great when they're sort of like loud and oily and everything, but yeah, motorcycles
can get annoying.
that are electric, then it's just a whole different feeling. And that sort of led me to wanting to build my own and having my own ideas about how they should be, and wondering why there weren't companies that produced I guess commuters that were sporty and fun and pretty lightweight. There's really a big divide between, big heavy sports bikes that are electric, and then none of them really are sold here in Australia. So I was like, well, why can't that be a thing? And over the last 2 years, I've probably worked out why that isn't a thing. Because there's a whole lot more to them than meets the eye. Like they look simple, but to get them right is something that takes a lot of effort. So yeah, I know you've helped out with this a lot, and a lot of people around here and also in Deakin have helped out a lot, working out what batteries work, what gear reduction systems work, how to oil them, how to cool an electric motor, how to cool the battery pack, how to charge it, how to maintain a good relationship between what you're doing with your wrist and how that powers the bike. And then also trying to stretch it to go as long as you can, because you know, it's difficult. We don't have a lot of charging stations or anything here in Australia. So you got to have something that is going to go where you need it and get back. So all of these things are really difficult because you build a big heavy bike that can go a long way, but it's not going to be great with performance. And then, yeah, you kind of like getting too far into things when you start going down that track. So yeah, just finding like a bit of a balance and building something new has been really fun.
Yeah, when you think about the moving parts in a petrol engine, it's kind of deceiving when you think of an electric motor. You just think, oh yeah, it's just a motor and your batteries and twist the throttle, like just connect it all up in a sequence and off you go. But yeah, as you were just saying, the deeper you go into it, the more you find out, and the harder it is to get overcome these issues and find ways around it. But that's what engineering is.
Exactly. Battery technology getting better and better, then it's only going to make these things more, I guess, you know, kids these days are growing up on electric bikes, and it's just going to be a generational thing that I think, you know, when I first jumped on an electric motorcycle, I was like, wow, this has like changed my mind forever. And I sort of needed the realization that, you know, not everyone's like me and doesn't have the same opportunities to get on an electric bike, and it's going to take a long time for people to understand the great things about them. And yeah, I'm pretty keen to be a part of that and watch it grow.
Yep, absolutely. It's the future. Slowly but surely, it's changing to electric.
Top end rebuilds will be a thing of the past. So
yeah, and a thing with the electric bike that you have, Nigel, you change the oil. The gear, it has a reduction gear drive, and the oil needs to be changed in that, I think, every 1,000 hours, you've said?
Yeah, something ridiculous like that.
Yeah, you basically don't change it.
As long as the chain's on there and it's not rattling around, then and you just got tread on the tyres and there's air in them, then you're good to go. And yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, that aspect of it is exciting, really exciting for me. I'm used to spending $80 on a bottle of oil, and that will last 4 oil changes, and then you get 3 hours of riding or 5 hours of riding to an oil change, and the money that will be spent is way less compared to a petrol engine in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, companies have spent you know, years and years and years developing the highest performance out of these machines, and they're getting to the point where that's sort of coming at a loss of longevity. And then also you've got your emissions laws for bikes that are on the road. So you're taking like something that's been engineered to the highest standard, and then it has to perform with the least amount of emissions, which is kind of counterintuitive to the whole performance side of things. And then you've got electric vehicles that, boom, you've got all the power, all the torque. You've just got to make it last for as long as you can. So it's like coming at things from the whole different angle, where you've got all of this power. All you have to do is harness it and engineer everything around it. And so once batteries get better, then things are just going to change forever, and they already are. So I know a lot of manufacturers are, you know, spending 75 to 90% of their R&D dollars on electric vehicles. So yeah, it's something that's coming pretty fast.
Yeah, that's insane. It sounds like it's opening up a whole nother can of worms for the industry. So that's good.
Definitely more and more electric concepts that you see posted by companies like Yamaha and whatnot.
Yeah, definitely.
Everyone's getting into it. Just had a couple of questions regarding your bike from Hamish. What stage is the bike at the minute? Is it rideable or still developing?
Yeah,
little ways off.
Yeah, it's taken. I mean, we're talking about doing this on a budget of basically zero.
All right.
So, like, it's just been something that we've been chipping away at and just learning. I've had a really difficult time of just sort of, you know, trying to move with technology. You know, what I thought would be the perfect setup for it last year has already changed this year. 2020 hasn't brought a whole lot of great things, but the technology is still sort of going forward, and batteries are getting better and electric motors are getting better. And there's got to be a point where I say, all right, this is going to be sort of the ultimate setup and run with that. But I'm not looking to produce a complete motorcycle at this point. I'm really just looking to repower a motorcycle with a kit and then sort of go from there.
Yeah. So
It's not a massive engineering exercise. It's more just getting the driveline right, because I understand how frames work and how suspension works and all of that type of thing. It's more getting the stuff that I don't understand working before the rest.
yeah, so a bit of an explanation to what you were just saying there. You can sort of see it in the back corner of where you're sitting there, but that's a KTM 690 Duke frame, which is like obviously an on-road bike, and yeah, a 690cc petrol engine usually, and you buy it from KTM. And you've got two of them that you're converting to electric. And so you were just saying that the plan is to have a kit that you could sell to someone else that has one of them, and they slap the electric motor in and off they go.
Yeah, and even make all of the parts so small that you could pretty much get any motorcycle that is available on the market and retrofit this setup that I'm developing into them. So I've had it was sort of, Matt, you helped me a lot at the start, and then I was sort of struggling with a lot of the electronic side of things.
Yeah, which I'm hopeless with.
And I am too. Like, I can't weld things together, but I've had another Deakin student, Julian Paul, who's been absolutely instrumental in the way the electronics have all played out in this. And together we've just learned a bunch on it. And again, this isn't a full-time thing. We're just sort of chipping away at it whenever we've both got time. And yeah, it's starting to become really, really exciting. We're at the prototype phase where we're going to have a few products to trial out, and that's not going to be something that we're going to rush. I want to get this thing to the racetrack and spend a whole bunch of time, I guess, testing everything out. And again, the technology is going to change next year and the year after, so it's about sort of adapting to that. But I think our actual performance driveline is scalable, and then the batteries, as they get better and better, the driveline will only become more capable as the years go on.
Yeah. Looks like someone just had a question. Have you looked at a hybrid setup on a motorcycle? I don't know that you have.
Yeah. So when I was in Italy, I think it was last year. What a great year last year was.
Yeah. Got to go overseas.
Yeah, when you could travel. There were a few hybrid setups, and it just seems like you're just compiling all problems and bringing them into the one thing that was meant to be simple.
Yeah.
I think there is a place for hybrid motorcycles, like doing the math and figuring out how much horsepower or how many kilowatts it takes to power a motorcycle at 100 kilometers an hour. I think if you had a minimalist motor that was able to produce that amount of power to sustain that speed, then you would then be able to use your electronic driveline to be able to be the performance factor, and then you could use fossil fuels to be able to power your motorcycle to be able to stick to the speed limit. And I think there's a place for that, but then you've got to abide by all of these restrictions in terms of, holding the fuel somewhere, dealing with the heat, and then you've got your batteries and trying to compile all of that into a motorcycle.
Yeah, it sounds like you're almost mixing the problems of the petrol engine with the problems of an electric engine and stuffing them all on a bike. And yeah, as you said, there probably is a place for it, but
before before there's charging points all around Australia, it probably would be handy to have a whippersnipper motor that you could just fire up and get to your local power point with once your battery runs out.
Yeah. All right. We've had a few questions, so I think quickly
we'll leave a couple of them for the end, Matt.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Talk about them.
Yeah, we haven't got to some stuff yet. Some of the stuff there. So the next thing that I was going to talk about was pretty much just any other projects you've got going on. So you've got some projects with ETS Fab. I know you've got the S15. You've done the BMW chopper lately, or in the last year. Yeah, a bit of a insight into what else you've got going on, as well as the electric bike project.
Yeah, like I said, the electric bike project has just been a bit of a thing that's happening on the side, but the ETS Fab is really, I guess, at the moment, what's driving a lot of things, and I really want to get stuck into that S15, and that's going to be really fun because it's been a long time since I've built a car, and it's something that I know how to do, and I've got a whole bunch of ideas on how to do it better than I ever have before. So I want to get stuck into that. This year was meant to be a whole heap of travel to a whole heap of events and over to America to debut that bike there at Born Free Show, and that's now happening next year. So a lot of things have kind of been put on the back burner. Obviously travel's all off, so yeah, it sort of leaves me really just with the stuff that I've got going at the moment. I haven't really had time to plan anything else, but I've got a whole bunch of ideas, but yeah, just finding the hours to do them. It's been difficult.
Yeah. So what are your plans with the S15? So like moving forward, what do you think you'll do to it? I know so far you've done the strut brace and the power brace, and you're planning to incorporate that build with your course. So make videos of how you're making something and why you're making it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then people can figure it out themselves using your videos and yeah, learn from there.
Something I've always like I'm not, I guess when I talk about fabrication, like I'm not the god of fabrication. Like I don't know how to do everything perfectly, but what I do know is sort of how to put all of those things into practice. And you know, when you talk about motorsport fabrication, you're not talking about people who can weld like robots. You're not talking about, I mean, there are these people in there, but you know, what I want to get out to people with ETS Fab is that, like with the tools that most of us can afford, then there's a lot of possibilities and things that you can do with those tools. And Matt, you'd know that my workshop's not full of super high-end dollar stuff. It's really just you know, stuff that the regular guy would have, and that's what ETS Fab is about. It's about being able to put a whole bunch of ideas and a whole bunch of passion into home projects. And the S15 kind of encapsulates that because it starts from being a fairly stock car that a lot of people would sort of, you know, be able to relate to. I'd love to get to the point to do a full tube frame vehicle, but at this stage, I think I want to take people on that ride. So I want to be able to show them all of the parts that are built for the S15, how that's done in super detail so that they can do it all themselves, and then take them to the point where, you know, they kind of understand how you get to the point of building a full tube frame vehicle. And in fact, it's really, like, I'll be honest, full tube frame cars and stuff are easier than working with something that's been developed from the factory, because you're not working within the confines of what a street-driven car sort of allows you. So when I built my Hilux, it was pretty daunting at the start, but then once I started sort of joining the dots, I was like, well, you know, this isn't that hard. It's just time and energy and not that much money when you think about it.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's more just getting that S15 to the point where people sort of understand how to do things themselves.
Yeah, cool. Any other projects you've got going on at the moment? That's about it.
I don't know. You tell me. I've probably told you a few that I've got in the plan.
No, that's almost it. There's the beadlock wheels, and that's about it.
Yeah, the off-road mudders for winter.
Yeah. Oh, Trent, you're up.
Yeah. No. So I guess your past projects, bits and pieces you've done. Your Hilux build you mentioned there, is that sort of the one that sort of kick-started Engineered to Slide? And yeah, I guess tell us a bit about how that started, because I've got a Hilux similar and I don't think it could drift at all. It drifts when the roads are wet. That's about it. Yeah,
this was one that this was a funny one because it put it put Engineered the Slide on the map and really created the brand. Unbeknownst to me, so I was drifting from, like I said, 2004 till about, well, it sort of went right up to 2012, I guess. And then I've just sort of done exhibition stuff from that point on. But in 2004, I bought my first drift car and started modifying it from that point. And I started modifying so many aspects of it that the factory car that it was sort of wasn't really, like, everything was sort of in the wrong spot, and I sort of understood where everything needed to go, and like you'd lower it right down and sort of drop the center of gravity and increase the performance of the suspension and everything, but then everything was sort of all wrong. And then I had when was that, maybe 2006 or 2007, I bought a Toyota Hilux extra cab and I built a mini truck out of it. And then, so complete airbag suspension, dropped it on the ground, but then welded a tow bar into it. And I used to tow my drift car to the racetrack with my airbag mini truck. So I'd be cruising along the highway in my mini truck, which was the same shape as my drift car. And I'd be looking in the rear vision mirror and I'd get the idea of sort of like kind of crossing the two together. And I was always a fan of mini trucks, and then I was always a fan of drifting and sort of Japanese culture as well. And then sort of one thing led to another, and I was wondering whether anybody had ever sort of mixed the two and whether it had worked properly. And then I couldn't really find much. And there's a couple of guys in Japan that had done SR20 swaps in their Nissan or Datsun 720s, which was super cool. And then as my fabrication ability and my time at Ford and my chat with engineers and everything was sort of going on, I was starting to understand how things work, how bad my drift cars are because of the confines of the factory chassis, and then maybe what could be. So then I was thinking, well, what if I bought an S15, so an S15 Nissan, cut the body off it, got a Hilux body, and then lowered that right down over it so that the Nissan S15 sat at its normal ride height, so all the suspension arms and everything was basically as per factory, and then drop the body over it because a Hilux has quite a tall roof. Drop the body over it, welded that to the S15 floor pan, and then sort of just went out drifting. And I thought, yep, that can't be that hard. And I found a Hilux body on eBay for like $200. And then I found a crashed Nissan S15 with a really good driveline, but then the body was stuffed on it. So I thought, all right, I'm going to do it. And I got to the Nissan S15, I got it home and I got the grinder out and I was about to cut the body off it. And I thought, oh, I better just double check some measurements here, and basically went around it with a tape measure. And I was like, oh, it's just going to require so much welding to the factory sheet metal, which if anybody's done that knows it's a nightmare, that I'm probably better off starting from scratch. So I thought, all right, maybe I can pull the front and rear subframes out, which are pretty much a complete unit themselves. They just need the strut tops basically welded in to be, you know, self-sustainable. And then I could just set my wheelbase at 2700 mil, which is sort of something that I just came up with. And then drop the body over the top and then just join the dots with steel and just MIG weld the whole lot out of RHS and just get it going in about 6 months. So then I put the grinder down. I took the subframes and everything out of the S15. I went to Sydney, picked up this Toyota Hilux body. I cut the rear firewall out, the floor out, everything out, and then just sat these things where they needed to be. And then I got my MIG welder. I thought, nah, I'll do this properly. And I ordered all the tube from Race Tech in Sydney, which was all CAMS approved. Not 4130, 1020 mild steel. I built my own tube bender. So I got some plans off the internet, built my own tube bender, and sort of that didn't work out that good. So I rebuilt it and made it proper. and then actually ended up selling those plans on my website so people could build their own tube benders. And then sort of set the body out, the motor, the wheels, posted a few photos on Facebook, and it went crazy. Like everyone was like, oh my God, I can't wait to see this. And then I was like, oh, what have I done? Like there's years in this. My 6-month build just went to like, it was gonna be pretty crazy. And I had never TIG welded before. So I had a friend come over who built motorcycle race chassis and stuff like that, and he'd repaired sprint cars and built sprint cars from scratch. And he's like, well, why don't you do it properly and actually TIG weld it all? And I was like, well, I don't know how to TIG weld. And he's like, well, it's not that hard. And so I bought a TIG welder off eBay and learned to TIG weld. And then everything that I'd MIG welded for it, I basically threw in the bin, because that just changed my perception on how you can take things to a different level with TIG welding. Mind you, I was living in a 1-car garage, 2-bedroom unit, with my neighbor being sort of 3 meters away from me. So I had a limited amount of time. He worked afternoon shift, and I had a limited amount of time when I'd get home from work to be able to make noise. So being able to TIG weld really changed everything, because I didn't have to grind the welds back. I was able to do things right the first time, and the welding I could sort of do all night because it wasn't noisy either. So once I got to that point, I started building the chassis, and this tube bender that I'd made was working really well. Made the whole chassis up, and then that was probably 2 years into that build that I moved out of that unit, and then finished it off in my current house, and which had a 6 by 12 meter garage in the backyard, and was really able to set everything up properly and be able to build. So that ute was 3.5 years in the build, and if you had shown me a photo of it finished when I was starting it, I would have said that I was never capable of doing anything like that. And that's sort of where the blog and ETS Fab and everything started. It was more, I didn't know that one person could sort of produce something like that. Like I'd never really seen it before. So yeah. I thought if I sort of tell my story and show people how I'm doing it, then they'll get a pretty good idea for what's, what can be done. And as you can see, this actual photo was a really good one. I'd met this photographer, Dean Walters, at the surf shop that he was working at, and he's a bit of a larrikin. And I pulled up, and he jumped in the car, and he's like, "Oh, I know you build drift cars and stuff." And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Oh, I'm a photographer. Let me know if you ever need anything." And then this magazine called me, which was New Zealand Performance Car in New Zealand, obviously. And they're like, "Oh, we want the first feature on the ute." So I was like, "Oh, I've got this really rad idea," and ran it past Dean. And he was like, "Yeah, we'll strap the camera to the roof in this old warehouse. You can lay all the parts out, and then you can put it together." So this ended up being a time lapse where the whole ute came together. So this was in the center there, you'll see the chassis that I built out of the 1020 mild steel tube, which is all TIG welded. It has a full floor pan that's only 20 mil thick out of RHS, which is all just from the local metal land here in Breakwater. And then all the sheet metal was hand cut with an angle grinder. It measures about 0.8 to 1 mil, and all TIG welded. And everything was just measured using a tape measure. Nothing's really like super straight on it, but I sort of got it done to the best of my ability with the tools that I had, which were pretty limited. And it's powered by a Nissan SR20 2-litre, which I pulled out of another car. The suspension's all out of an S13 Silvia, which I actually went up to Queensland and did a whole heap of fabrication for the guy that built the suspension in payment for that. So yeah, the skills that I learned building this have really got me to the point where I am now, and it's sort of fast-tracked everything for Engineered to Slide. And it was a pretty wild ride. I look back on those days and I don't really remember doing anything but this. It was a point in my life where I just blanked everything out and just went at it. So yeah, to get to the point to sort of, roll this chassis out, and you'll see the rear end there has a factory Nissan IRS subframe. So that was all factory at that point, which I then worked out was bent. So I'd actually built this whole space frame around a bent rear subframe. So when I went to put a proper one in, it actually wouldn't fit. So I then remade that from scratch. And then once I was confident in TIG welding, bought a whole heap of chrome moly, made all of my suspension arms, and yeah, it was a whole heap of fun. Just there was sometimes there where I'd work for 2 or 3 weeks, and it'd kind of suck because you just toiling away, and then you'd roll it outside on a nice day, you'd sweep the garage out, and the garage was so small that I literally couldn't walk around it. So I couldn't work on it really in the garage. So yeah, when I'd be able to roll it out and sort of witness what I'd done over those last 3 weeks, it was payment for all of the pain that I'd gone through in building that component was always paid off, and it'd kind of drive me to the next point.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a really fun build, and yeah, it's definitely been the backbone of Engineered Slide. And I take it out and I do a lot of demonstrations. I did one at Summonats, actually crashed it into the wall, which was not that fun, especially on a car that everything is one-off. Like there's not one thing on that which is really off the shelf. Even the wheels, which I damaged, were made in Japan in early 2000s, and you can't buy them anymore. So they had to be repaired by someone who machined the lip again and respun them and welded them up. And yeah, all of the tube work that holds the body is really small. It's just made out of probably, a bit over 1/2 inch, 5/8 diameter ERW tube with a wall thickness of about 1 mil. So it's all just bent with a plumber's hand bender. And then, yeah, it's got all the links that hold all the panels off it. So it's really, really light. You can pull the whole body, the whole front off the vehicle. But yeah, when you hit something, it's pretty hard to repair. So every time I drive it, I've got the extra nerves of thinking that, all right, if I bin it, then I know that I'm going to be working for weeks and weeks and weeks to try and repair everything. So
Yeah.
I've just been doing a lot of demonstrations in it. And when I first finished it, it went over to New Zealand, and I debuted it over there at a few racetracks, and shot a film about it, which was really successful. And yeah, it was a fun ride. And it really, I think the best thing about it, like when I look back on it now, like I see the ute, but it's more than just a mechanical piece to me. Like it just taught me so much. A lot of the people I know now, I know through building that, and a lot of the success that Engineered Slide has had pretty much lies on the back of it. So yeah, it's been a bit of a backbone of the company, and probably one of the standout projects that I've done.
Yeah, unreal.
Yeah,
you really couldn't put a price on it if you tried to sell it. But speaking of that,
I think Shannon's got it insured for a couple of $100,000.
yeah. I don't know if you've seen the question, but we had, how much is the ute worth after it's all said and done?
If anybody wants to pinch it, just hide it until I get the payout, and then we'll come to an agreement.
Yeah. Righto.
Yeah, beauty. When you were building that, was that sort of working it out on the fly? Like you'd obviously design different bits and pieces on pen and paper. You might sketch something, but you didn't do a CAD model or anything. And
I reckon not a day goes by where I don't get asked to buy the plans for it, which is pretty crazy to me, because like it was like I say that it was a join the dots project, but it really was. Like I literally went, all right, this is where the front wheels are going, this is where the rear wheels are going, this is where I have to sit, this is the body that sits over it all, and then just go from there. Like It's sort of, when I look back on it now, and like this is coming from someone who had never done any CAD, I'd never really drawn anything, like I'd never done a sketch of dimension plans. Now, with the electric bike project, we scanned the whole frame. We scanned all the components. We bought them all into CAD. Like I see that's what I love about being here at Deakin. I see the value in being able to do that. But at the same time, I really appreciate a project just coming to life in front of you without really understanding where it's going. That's really fun as well. But I kind of, back when I started building it, you see a lot of people with renders now who like do a render of the car before they've built it. And like I was trying to find people who would render this for me, and I never found anybody who was able to do it. I was like, it's a Hilux, but it's like really low and it's got wide fenders and it's a drift car. And they draw me a drawing and I'm like, no, that's nothing like it. And they're like, well, explain what it's going to be like. And I was like, well, I can't really. It's sort of, I've got it in my head, but I can't explain it to anybody. And I was like, well, I'll just build it. Like, that'll be it. And yeah, it's sort of, it sounded so simple at the start and then got really, really involved as I went along. But that's the joy of it. Like you get to a point where you're like, all right, so I've got this done. How am I going to do the next thing? So that would always lead me to seeing what V8 supercars did in that situation. Aussie racing cars, vintage sports sedans, NASCARs, off-road trucks, the whole lot. And I'd sort of see how they all tackled that one problem. And then I'd see, like I'd go on eBay and I'd find surplus old race parts and see if I could adapt any of those to bits and pieces that I was building. And that really added to, I guess, the uniqueness of the bits and pieces, because if I had have had an open checkbook at the start, I would have just bought everything that I thought I needed. And then as it turned out, by doing everything one step at a time, you really take the opportunity to push things to the next level. And it really just grows from there. And yeah, you don't get the opportunity to say, all right, this is all the parts that I'm going to need. Let's order them, because you don't have the money to do it. So you really just take every little step. And that was really surprising, just kind of getting to the end point and going, well, that's way better than I ever thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We've had a question from Brody Demko asking, when building the drift truck, were you still working at Ford?
Definitely. I hope there's not too many Ford people watching this, but I did spend a lot of lunch times on the lathe making pieces for it. Yeah, I worked at Ford from 2001 or 2002 up until 2018. So yeah, and I built a Hilux between 2010 and 2014. So it took me a bit over 3.5 years, and I probably spent roughly, I'd say 3 to 4 hours a night, every single night, and then at least one day a weekend on it. So yeah, times that by 3.5 years, times that by $120 an hour, and that's how much it's worth to replace.
Yeah, pretty insane build.
Yeah, definitely.
It's unreal.
Yeah, and I was only 11 years old, I think, when you started that.
Yeah,
but
right.
There wasn't much before you built that truck. There wasn't a whole lot of that sort of stuff going around.
No, there really wasn't.
And you've I think it's inspired a lot of builds. Like I've seen a Hilux Drift Ute, which is one of the newer shaped Hiluxes, I think in Australia. Just scrolling through YouTube and stuff like that, you see so many different Frankenstein vehicles now, and it's always old mate in his back shed that just had a crazy idea.
Yep.
Very much like yourself. But yeah, I love to see that, and I think that's what you've inspired a lot over the years of what you've been doing. And speaking of the inspiration, do you have any, I guess you've sort of outlined it in Japanese culture so far, but where do you take your inspiration from with any of your projects, and including the cars and stuff?
Yeah, I never, I follow a lot of people that build stuff, but just pick little things from each one. I don't have like a standout inspiration, but I always just appreciate people who just do a lot with not much. Like I get a little, like people with a whole team behind them and endless amounts of money, like in a lot of motorsport. I can't understand it. Like Formula One, I've never really been a big fan of, and a lot of sort of high level motorsports, I've never really understood too much. V8 supercars and stuff like that, I've spent a bit of time in and around the paddock and have a lot of appreciation for the setups that those guys have. Like it's a pretty high level setup, but at the same time, you can understand a lot of it. But in terms of inspiration, it's more, I take, I don't know, I think that's something that's sort of, I can never pinpoint what it is, but I just pick little bits and pieces from, like when I was in high school, you know, I sort of in year 11 and 12, I just found out that you can like look into blogs that are in Japan and stuff like that, and had a whole bunch of inspiration there. But that was sort of before Instagram and before you were just bombarded with stuff. So it was, now it's really hard to find inspiration from a lot of people because you're just getting it from so many different channels. But back then I kind of had a pretty solid list of people who I'd sort of follow every single day and get updates from and gain a lot of inspiration from. But most of those never even spoke English, but they just posted a lot of photos, and I'd save them all and zoom in and work out how they did them. And I'd say the Japanese culture has probably been the biggest of them.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Matt Paddy has posted in the chat asking, well, stating he's recently married and wants some advice on how he can convince his wife to let him buy another project car.
Yeah, this is a tough one, Matt. I was pretty, like, I kind of see the difficulty in it now, and especially, I don't have kids yet, but I got a couple of needy dogs, and that takes up enough time. But yeah, trying to balance everything, especially if you work full time, is pretty difficult. The only thing I would sort of say to people that are struggling to find time is just lock down what you want to do, and even if it takes you a couple of years working on what you want to do, like without even starting it, like with the Hilux, it was something that I wanted to do so strongly that for probably 2 or 3 years I was thinking about it, and I got to the point where I just couldn't not do it. Like it was just hurting me so much that I wasn't doing it that
I couldn't stop you.
So I think when you get to that point, you find time, and yeah, I know with things that I don't prioritize, they just take so long. And there was a stage there with the Hilux project that I was just like, nothing else mattered. And it's kind of like, if you want to do a project like that, you got to be pretty selfish, I think. So when you have others and you have partners, it's super difficult to do that, but you just have to be prepared for it to take longer, I think.
Mm.
Yeah, great.
And then probably the last question here, Jordan Ritchie has put up a Q&A question just saying, hi guys, Jordan Ritchie here. Thanks for this webinar. For reference, he works at Ford in the test engineering.
Yeah, perfect.
So yeah, you might be billed for all those lathe hours now.
Hopefully won't rat you out.
And he'd like to ask if you had any thoughts on how much metalworking experience engineers should obtain before going into industry. Many issues seem to come when engineers have no empathy for how things can be fabricated.
Yeah, it was a
Good
funny one
question.
because at Ford, it was the majority of engineers were not even interested in cars, and sort of having they wouldn't have no understanding of really how anything worked. Like we had some engineers who were qualified engineers come into the machine shop and they wanted a bush made up with an outside diameter of 25.4 and an inside diameter of 25.4. We're like, well, there, it's done.
Yeah.
What do you mean? Where did you get your certificates from? But yeah, it's long been a thing where those on the shop floor say, fucking engineers, they like they have no understanding for how things are. And there's always going to be this divide between the two. And I think there's always been a conversation around here, and a lot of the people who I've spoken to at Deakin about getting students understanding steel and its strengths and what you can sort of just do with it with regular tools. And I think it's a super powerful thing, because one thing that I've always done is I've never over-engineered things. Like I've obviously not having any CAD experience or being able to stress test anything. I've just done it on like by the seat of the pants. So I've always built things that are too light and too weak, and then found the breaking point and then upgraded them. Whereas a lot of people go the other way and build things too strong and too heavy and never learn anything. So
Never find its limits.
yeah, you got to find its limits, and it's a pretty hard thing, because you know there was such a divide between going to university and getting apprenticeship, and there was nothing in between. Like I ideally wanted to go to Deakin to do mechanical engineering, to learn everything I wanted to learn, but then I wanted to go to Ford, and I wanted to get my hands dirty, and I wanted to learn things on the tools, and there was really nothing in between. So I think if you're an engineer and you spend time at home just doing small jobs, like we had Matt Zampatti before, and I know he spends some time in the garage doing some projects. I know you do, Matt, and a lot of other engineers, even if it's just some mechanical stuff on your car. I mean, anybody who learns to round a nut or strip a thread, it's valuable.
Yeah, that was a massive thing. I found myself in a really similar situation with going to uni or getting an apprenticeship. I ended up trying to go in between and went to TAFE, and then was really close to trying to get an apprenticeship, but ended up coming to uni. And yeah, I think the year at TAFE ended up counting for my whole first year at uni, but it was really valuable to learn some practical skills. And I've always had that background for it, coming from the country and with motorbikes and cars and stuff. But yeah, it was really valuable, and always try and keep improving the practical skills and understanding of it.
Yeah, completely. Myself coming from tech school, and when I was at tech school and when I left, I think it was one of the only ones in Victoria. And it was just the most valuable thing ever. Like my metalwork teacher was just the raddest guy. Like I would spend way too long in there, and he'd just sit in there until I was done, and like everybody would be out to lunch, and I'd just be chipping away at my little project. And yeah, I think if we could get more of that in high school, then you know that instant understanding of how metals are welded or turned, or just the strength of things in auto class, or just how to do up nuts and bolts, because a lot of people don't have that opportunity, and a lot of people who are interested in engineering don't have a family like mine who take you to the racetrack or take you to things that involve those bits and pieces. Like, you know, after an event at the speedway, you'd walk through the pits and there'd be like mangled wings and suspension bits, and they'd say, here, take them home. And like, you can kind of get a feel for things, but it's not really like that anymore. And I know the government are trying to put a lot of emphasis on TAFEs and also schools, but then there's safety risks with all that stuff, which kind of makes it even more difficult. So kids from the country and kids with parents who take them to be involved in things regarding engineering have such a massive head start. And yeah, I think everybody deserves a bit of a chance to have a bit of a crack at this stuff.
Yeah, it'd be really good to see the uni try and implement some more practical, hands-on technical classes and stuff, even if it's something simple where you're just watching. I always have found those things most interesting. Like watching lectures is always going to happen at uni, but yeah, seeing the other stuff that you're going to find out about eventually when you get into the industry is pretty important as well.
Yeah, I don't know, even from my experience, like when I did my vet course, the things of how steel reacts to being welded and heated, it even transfers to civil, like steel structures and stuff. Like it's all super relevant of how things go together, and having that bit of the bit of empathy for how things are actually built.
Yep.
So,
I reckon
yeah.
all schools
Anyway.
just need a press in the corner with a big clear cabinet, and you can just chuck anything in there and crush it.
Yeah, that's a really good idea.
And they can crash like phones and stuff when people are using them at the wrong time.
So some fingers get crushed in it.
That's why the page is around it.
All right.
Anyway, we're 5 minutes over, so
That's all right.
we'll wrap her up.
Yeah, so big thanks to Nigel for giving up his night to come along and have a chat to us. It's been really, really good to get an insight into your life, I guess, and what projects you're doing and some of the extra stuff. Where would people go to find out more about Engineer to Slide?
Yeah, there's a few channels. So Engineer to Slide, the majority of the stuff that I've done is all published on engineertoslide.com, which has a blog, and there's years and years and years of my learnings on there. So that's a really good one. You'll see the whole Hilux project on there. And then my Instagram is basically going to keep you up to date with everything that I'm doing. Motorcycles, cars, push bikes, the whole lot. If you want to check out and want to learn about fabrication, then ETS Fab is a really good one. We've just launched the TIG course. So even if you don't have tools, then the Motorsport Fabrication Fundamentals course is a really good one. These are available at etsfab.com. So if you're interested in getting into any fabrication or motorsport related stuff and want to know what tools you need or what setup you need in your garage, or just to understand all of these aspects a little bit further, then that's a really good one. We're just about to launch the MIG course as well. So TIG welding, MIG welding, and the fabrication fundamentals is up there. So etsfab.com, and then that's basically it. We've got Facebook and a few other bits and pieces, but yeah, if you check out engineertoslide.com and etsfab, then you should find just about enough to cover your whole rest of 2020.
Yeah, great. Was the ETS Fab, was that a free course or was that a pay per course type thing?
It's a pay per course.
Yep. Sweet.
So yeah, you can do it in payments, and if you find that it's not right for you, then we offer a 60-day money-back guarantee. So it's really good if you jump into it and you feel that it's either too simple for you or too advanced for you, then you can get out without any questions asked. So
You can try and do it in 60 days and then get your money back.
yeah, just screen record it and send it to everyone for $10.
It's a good idea.
No, don't do that.
No, but it's a really good thing, and that's something that I'm trying to promote as much as I can, because at the end of the day, that's what I want to be doing. I want to be, fabricating and telling the story about how these things come together and teaching people, and also, adding to their time on the tools and trying to make that better for them.
Yeah.
Yeah, beauty. I guess just a shameless plug to end the webinar. So we are, well, Matt and I are from the Deakin Engineering Society, as you probably would have guessed, obviously. But you can become a DES member at DUSA. Follow us on all our socials and that. So yeah, if you're a Deakin student involved in engineering, definitely sign up to be a member. And yeah, come along to all these sorts of events, and feel free to send us ideas of other events and what more you want to see.
Yep.
So,
And get on the Facebook page and give us a message if you have any questions or want to become a member or get more involved in the society too.
Yep.
Thanks everyone for watching.
So thanks for coming. Just a final shout out to Rob McHenry. He's the guy that's helped us set up this webinar and helped us with a lot of the runnings a bit. So definitely need to thank him big time.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah. So thanks to everyone for coming.
Alrighty.
Oh, and thank you. Cheers.
Yeah.